and I began getting that feedback from other people, and I began to see that, yeah, this is a good way to sort of give people a chance to try you out. You know, I started off at a price of $5.99.
Right.
You know, that was, you know, that's not that much more than people would spend on, you know, a McDonald's extra value meal. And, you know, she felt that, you know, people would take a chance on it. As I understand what happened in the mass market paperback right now is that, you know, there are literally physical slots in places like drugstores and grocery stores.
Sure.
And they're fewer than there used to be, and they're dominated by romance, suspense, and vampires.
Oh, that's true.
The traditional mass market mystery has been completely crowded out of the field for now. As you told me earlier, there are cycles. So,
well, there are, and I think it may come back, but a lot of that, Laura, just has to do with consolidations, and there's just, it's sort of like, you know, Barnes and Noble and Borders kind of dominate the chain bookselling market. It came to the fact that just a couple of companies dominate that mass market distribution, and, you know, they're driven really just by dollars and convenience, and it's harder. I remember being stranded in the Albuquerque airport with nothing to read, which, I mean, has not happened to me for years because I travel with books. But we had a rental car failure or something, and so my timing for how much I had to read was shot to hell. There were literally four titles in this enormous airport in the bookstore. 4 only.
Wow.
All of which were, I don't remember who they were, but they were all, you know, like bestseller titles or something. And I was despondent. I was facing an hour in an airplane with absolutely nothing to read and nothing I could buy. And I thought, wow, that is, and I think the trade paperback relates to a lot of things. It relates to economics for publishers, the fact that if you publish it in hardcover, you can publish it in trade paperback. You can use the same artwork, you can use the same typesetting, and you can move it into Lightning Source if you run out. You don't have to face expensive reprints. So, I mean, it's really, in a lot of ways, an economic thing. It also relates to, I think, an aging reader population. You can make it a bigger book. It's easier to read.
Women's book clubs love trade paperbacks.
Exactly.
It's a big selling point with
So,
them.
but the reason I asked you the question way back was that it's harder today for a new writer to have the time to develop a career. It's kind of like two, 3 strikes and you're out because of the amount of money that's involved in the promotion. I've seen a number of people come in hugely heralded, and then 2 or 3 books, didn't live up to their expectations, their history. You had a chance, and these other people had a chance to really write a number of books and build up a career.
Well, we weren't hugely heralded. It's not like when anyone signed me or Harlan Coben that a press release went out and said, because we didn't get breathtaking amounts of money. We were paperback originals. We were given almost sort of a nice, we were allowed to develop without too much attention.
You were given space, I think, and time, which are really invaluable gifts. I had an editor the other day who wrote to me and said she'd gone to auction, paid $1 million for her first novel. She had no idea if it would work or not. And the corollary to that is if it doesn't work, that's a one-book author.
Right, and it's the author who pays the price. It's so hard because there's this advice, I give it, George Pelecanos gives it, except it's impossible to take. And our advice is don't get overpaid.
Right.
And apparently a couple years ago, we were at a venue where we were in discussion on stage and said that. And I heard later from someone that someone in the audience turned to friends and said, yeah, but how am I going to say no to this offer that was just made to me? You can't. You can't. What are you going to do? I mean, all you can do is talk to your agent, ask good questions about what's really going on here. How can I ever earn this money out? The writer who made that comment, that contract didn't work out so well.
It's like athletes, they price themselves right off their team, which can be extremely difficult.
No, I never want to be overpaid. I mean, first of all, to me, the whole goal was, can I do this full-time for a living? And I started doing that in 2001, and everything there after that, just gravy. It's like, as long as I can be a full-time novelist, I'm not going to sweat anything else.
Let me ask you something about another thing to fall. You have written Tess Monahan on your own terms, largely based upon your, not largely, but you yourself were a reporter. You are from Baltimore, so you've been able to draw on yourself. Here's a book where you actually drew on a world, and I'm going to bring this up
Yeah, no,
because
it's fair.
it really does
Totally
sort of
fair.
relate to your, your credentials, so to speak, for going into this world. What is the world that
The world of television, and I'm married to what is casually called a showrunner, and I just had too much good stuff. I knew too much, and it was too interesting. I knew it was a world that interested other people. I mean, some ways I always remember, like, the moment I realized I would one day write a book about television is when my husband came home one day and talked about some tricky insurance problems they were having because, they have to get all this insurance on the production and on various actors, and it turned out that one of the actors had a health problem that he or she had been masking, and I just thought, I can't even believe you know about that. It seems to me that violates that person's privacy, and there's just so many things like that I thought, this is too good. I have to write about it. I've got too much good stuff. I've had a worm's eye view of this. I had it for 6 years.
Well, you have Tess writing as an outsider. It's sort of like, sending somebody into a foreign country, and they can report back to you and nobody says, well, but you're not Venetian, so how can you write about Venice?
Right.
I mean, Donna Leon, for example, is an American living in Venice, so although I think her books are celebrated for their sense of being Venetian, nevertheless, there's you and David, because of David, you've had a chance to know it from the inside, but because of Tess, your character, you have a chance to write about it from the outside. David could not write the same book, having been a producer.
I don't think he could. I don't think he could bear to think about it.
How's this worked for you and David? Has it changed anything in your relationship, the fact that you're writing a book about what he does?
I think he liked it. I would take him to dinner and interview him and pick up the check, usually. I think he liked talking about what he did. He liked the fact that I was coming at it from a viewpoint not of, I want to make fun of all of this, although I do have some fun with it, but that I was very interested in the work, how hard it was, how long the days were, what could go wrong. I wanted the jargon. Like one jargon from the world of television that I still don't understand is that the trailers that are used for catering and also for the actors, they're called bangers. And there's no explanation from that I've ever gotten. The fact that, I think most people would think about it, but there's so many different departments that work. And you have to have set design and art direction and wardrobe and makeup and hair. You have to have a transportation department that's staffed with Teamsters.
I was going to say the unions play. I thought that was one of the interesting things I learned reading this was the role of unions. And of course, Baltimore is a city where unions and all have had a history. So in fact, I thought your whole discussion of film, Baltimore's history with movies and film was truly fascinating.
Yeah, it's. I mean, in a way, the book almost is a little forlorn because this is the first time in years that there hasn't been a big project up and running in Baltimore. There are a couple of small things maybe going on, and John Waters will always be there. He's like the Swallows returning to Capistrano.
Right.
He returns to Baltimore again and again. But the city had this really long run over 15 years between Homicide, The Corner, and then The Wire, with all these other movies that came in. And now a lot of states are competing for those dollars and coming up with much better incentives. Connecticut's a big one on the East Coast. A lot of stuff is going to Connecticut. And so Maryland doesn't have anywhere near the slice of the film pie that it used to have.
Vancouver's another place. We were in Vancouver and looking at these huge sand sets. But it also occurred to me, because David was a best-selling author with Homicide before, he kind of accidentally got into television, that he would have more empathy with you as a writer, and maybe he's happy now to see that you have, a better knowledge of how he works.
Yeah.
It's kind of a nice balance.
It is a good balance. We get each other's jobs.
Now that The Wire has hit its last episode, is he planning on going back to a book or television, or do you know?
He's in post-production on a 7-hour miniseries about the war in Iraq, based on a book by Evan Wright, who's a Rolling Stone reporter embedded with some of the first Marines into Baghdad. It was called Generation Kill. They shot it in Africa last year from June through December, using different parts of Africa to fake different parts of Iraq. And for example, the Maputo in Mozambique was where they did a lot of the Baghdad shooting, and he has been in post-production, which is very long and complicated ever since then. In any given week, he's either in New York, LA, or London working on the post-production, and that should be on the air this July.
So he's always moving on to a new project too, right?
The television thing, it's interesting. I mean, I think David wants to write books again, and I would be very supportive of that. But he's been given these really great opportunities in television, and